Now, there was a time when Amnesty International was really a safe organization to support. They genuinely campaigned for all people imprisoned for non-violent views. I mean, that they were okay. But that ended long ago. Now they're on the hard left, intensely selective. They've criticized Canada for, wait for this, not arresting former President George W. Bush when he visited. And there's a lot more to say. You're going to love this. Charlie Cook is from the National Review, and he joins us via Skype from Connecticut. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Pretty well. Now, this is incredible, really. This is a former president of the United States of America who some people disagree with. A few radicals said he should be arrested as a war criminal. The Canadian government said, no, we're a civilized government, we don't do that. And now Amnesty International have condemned the Canadian government for not fulfilling their democratic pledge. What's gone wrong with Amnesty?
Well, as you say, Amnesty used to be a pretty good organization. It was set up for a good reason. There are people throughout the world who are put in prison for what they say and what they think. Obviously, they're regarded as prisoners of conscience. And I remember as a kid at school, I used to write letters in my Amnesty club, to Cuba and so on, please let this guy go. They've gone down a regrettable road, though, and they've lost what distinguished them. In a sense, they've decided to get into politics rather than relying on what they had before, which was really moral authority. And so you see these stunts asking for Bush to be arrested for supposed war crimes. But you'll notice, even if they were going down that road, it's still a left-wing tinged road, because they haven't asked for, say, the sitting president, Barack Obama, to be arrested, even though he took out bin Laden, which they condemned.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, and drone attacks have continued to perhaps increase. I'm fine with that, but it's under Obama. We think of some of the world's dictators, people like Mugabe and various Middle Eastern dictators. Now, Amnesty rarely say a word about them, but as you say, they condemned the killing of Osama bin Laden, which was done under Barack Obama.
Well, that's right. The amazing thing about the Obama administration is how silent the anti-war left has become, and that includes Amnesty. Suddenly, these drone attacks seem not to be a problem anymore, and I think that gives you an insight into the way the left and some of these NGOs think, which is that the poverty of a crime is determined by the person doing it. But, that's not a surprise, really, from Amnesty. In 2006, they released, throughout the course of the year, Amnesty released 48 reports condemning Israel. Now, if you put that into context, it was 48 for Israel compared to 35 for Iran, 7 for Syria, and just 2 for Saudi Arabia. And they wrote absolutely nothing in the entire year about the capture of Israeli soldiers by Hezbollah and Hamas. So are we to presume that these soldiers don't matter because they're Israeli? Are we to presume that somehow if it happens in Israel, it's worse than if it happens in Saudi Arabia? And are we to believe the fiction that Saudi Arabia is really a better country to be in than Israel? I think not.
Of course, the truth is that Amnesty are allowed to operate in Israel, and by and large, they're allowed to speak to soldiers and go into military camps and so on. Whereas in Saudi Arabia, they can't participate at all in the body politic. If they're identified, they'd be arrested, and if they're lucky, exiled. It could be even worse for them.
Yeah, and really what's one of the silly things here is that Amnesty seems not to distinguish between states. In fact, the Canadian representative for Amnesty said this. He said they're not in the business of rating countries, saying one is better than the other. Well, that's absurd. I mean, when you look at what Amnesty says on the death penalty, that becomes very silly. The fact that they're allowed into Israel should be an indication of Israel being a better country than those they're not allowed into. But they don't see it like that. They see things in a very unitary way. So the death penalty is a complicated topic. Many people have different views on it. But I doubt you will find many reasonable thinking people, for example, who would say that the death penalty as operated in China or North Korea is the same as the death penalty as operated in the United States. Yeah. Likewise with Canada and the president. Canada is a good country, if you like. I mean, we can split hairs over Canadian policy, sure, but Canada is in the good column. And for the Canadian Amnesty International representative to say that he wouldn't make that judgment just shows that they're out of touch with reality. It
really does. And I've noticed that their treatment of Turkey has been rather soft. There are more journalists. And originally, Amnesty spent a lot of time talking about journalists who are in prison. There are more journalists in prison in Turkey than any other country on earth, which is incredible because their population is not that vast. Yet they're not mentioned very often by Amnesty. You juxtapose it with Israel. I don't know of any journalists who are imprisoned. And there may be, but I'm not aware of any who are imprisoned in Israel merely for what they have written. Yet, as you mentioned, 48 different condemning reports about that country.
Right. I mean, one of the things that Amnesty has said in the past is that they prefer to focus on democratic and free countries because they can bring public opinion to bear better, and the governments are more responsive. But it seems to me an incompatible position. If you're going to allow that democratic countries are more likely to bring about positive, as they see it, change, then you have to accept that democratic countries are perhaps better. In terms of the way they're run.
Yeah,
so it seems an odd combination there.
It does. You know, it's very sad because they're not alone, Amnesty. Oxfam is another. There are several similar organisations that were pretty much respected throughout the political process as doing good work for people who deserved help. But they've all lost that now. So I think that the people who suffer will be those who are imprisoned and those who are starving and so on. As always, great to speak to you. Thank you so very much indeed.
Thank you very much.